The Khmer Empire, or Angkor Empire, are the terms that historians use to refer to Cambodia from the 9th century to the 15th century, when the nation was a Hindu/Buddhist empire in Southeast Asia. The empire referred to itself as Kambuja or Kambujadeśa, which were ancient terms for Cambodia. The empire grew out of the former civilizations of Funan and Chenla, at times ruled over and or vassalized most of mainland Southeast Asia and parts of southern China, stretching from the tip of the Indochinese Peninsula northward to modern Yunnan province, China, and from Vietnam westward to Myanmar. Perhaps its most notable legacy is the site of Angkor, in present-day Cambodia, the Khmer capital during the empire's zenith. The majestic monuments of Angkor, such as Angkor Wat and Bayon, bear testimony to the Khmer Empire's immense power and wealth, impressive art and culture, architectural technique, aesthetics achievements, and the variety of belief systems that it patronized over time. Satellite imaging has revealed that Angkor, during its peak in the 11th to 13th centuries, was the largest pre-industrial urban center in the world. The beginning of the era of the Khmer Empire is conventionally dated to 802, when King Jayavarman II declared himself Chakravartin on Phnom Kulen. The empire ended with the fall of Angkor in the 15th century. Historiography. The history of Angkor as the central area of settlement of the historical kingdom of Kambujadeśa is also the history of the Khmer kingdom from the 9th to the 13th centuries. From Kambuja itself, and so also from the Angkor region, no written records have survived other than stone inscriptions. Therefore, the current knowledge of the historical Khmer civilization is derived primarily from archaeological excavation, reconstruction and investigation. Stone inscriptions, which report on the political and religious deeds of the kings. Reliefs in a series of temple walls with depictions of military marches, life in the palace, market scenes, and the daily life of the population. Reports and chronicles of Chinese diplomats, traders and travelers. History. Formation and growth. Jayavarman II, the founder of Angkor. According to Stock Tom inscription, circa 781, Indrapura was the first capital of Jayavarman II, located in Bante Priai Nokor, near today's Kampong Cham. After he eventually returned to his home, the former kingdom of Chenla, he quickly built up his influence, conquered a series of competing kings, and in 790 became king of a kingdom called Kambuja by the Khmer. He then moved his court northwest to Mahendraparvata, far inland north from the Great Lake of Tonle Sap. Jayavarman II is widely regarded as a king who set the foundations of the Angkor period in Cambodian history, beginning with a grandiose consecration ritual that he conducted in 802 on the sacred Mount Mahendraparvata, now known as Phnom Kulen, to celebrate the independence of Kambuja from a place inscriptions called Java. At that ceremony, Prince Jayavarman II was proclaimed a universal monarch or god king. He declared himself Chakravartin in a ritual taken from the Hindu tradition, thereby not only becoming the divinely appointed and therefore uncontested ruler, but also simultaneously declaring the independence of his kingdom from Java. According to some sources, Jayavarman II had resided for some time in Java during the reign of Sailendras, or the Lords of Mountains, hence the concept of Deva Raja or God King was ostensibly imported from Java. At that time, Sailendras allegedly ruled over Java, Sumatra, the Malay Peninsula and parts of Cambodia, around the Mekong Delta. The first pieces of information on Jayavarman II came from the K.235 stone inscription on a stele in Stock Tom Temple, Isan region, dating to 1053. It recounts 2.5 centuries of service that members of the temple's founding family provided for the Khmer court, mainly as chief chaplains of the Shaivite Hindu religion. Historians debate whether Java means the Indonesian island of Java, Champa, or a different location. According to an older established interpretation, Jayavarman II was a prince who lived at the court of Sailendra in Java and brought back to his home the art and culture of the Javanese Sailendran court to Cambodia. This classical theory was revisited by modern scholars such as Claude Jacques and Michael Vickery, who noted that Khmer used the term Chvia to describe the Khams, their close neighbors. Moreover, Jayavarman's political career began at Viatapura in eastern Cambodia, which makes the scenario of long-time contacts with the Khams more probable than the scenario of a long stay in distant Java. Finally, many early temples on Phnom Kulen show both Cham and Javanese influences, even if their asymmetric distribution seems typically Khmer. In the following years, he extended his territory and, later in his reign, moved from Mahendraparvata and established his new capital of Haraharalaya near the modern Cambodian town of Rolis. He thereby laid the foundation of Angkor, which was to arise some 15 kilometers to the northwest. Jayavarman II died in the year 835 and he was succeeded by his son Jayavarman III. Jayavarman III died in 877 and was succeeded by Indravarman I. The successors of Jayavarman II continually extended the territory of Kambuja. Indravarman I managed to expand the kingdom without wars and initiated extensive building projects, which were enabled by the wealth gained through trade and agriculture. Foremost were the Temple of Pra Ko and irrigation works. Indravarman I developed Haraharalaya further by constructing Baikong circa 881. Baikong in particular bears striking similarity to the Borobudur temple in Java, which strongly suggests that it served as the prototype for Baikong. There must have been exchanges of travelers, if not missions, between the Khmer kingdom and the Sailendras in Java, transmitting to Cambodia not only ideas, but also technical and architectural details. Yasodharapura, the first city of Angkor. Indravarman I was followed by his son Yasovarman I, who established a new capital, Yasodharapura, the first city of Angkor. The city's central temple was built on Phnom Bakheng, a hill which rises around 60 meters above the plain on which Angkor sits. Under Yasovarman I the East Baray was also created, a massive water reservoir of 7.1 by 1.7 kilometers. At the beginning of the 10th century, the kingdom split. Jayavarman IV established a new capital at Kokur, some 100 kilometers northeast of Angkor, called Lingapura. Only with Rajendravarman II was the royal palace returned to Yasodharapura. He took up again the extensive building schemes of the earlier kings and established a series of temples in the Angkor area, not the least being the East Meban, a temple located on an artificial island in the center of the East Baray, and several Buddhist temples, such as Pre-Rup, and monasteries. In 950, the first war took place between Kambuja and the kingdom of Champa to the east. The son of Rajendravarman II, Jayavarman V, reigned from 968 to 1001. After he had established himself as the new king over the other princes, his rule was a largely peaceful period, marked by prosperity and a cultural flowering. He established a new capital slightly west of his father's and named it Jayendranagari. Its state temple, Ta Keo, was to the south. At the court of Jayavarman V lived philosophers, scholars, and artists. New temples were also established. The most important of these are Bante Sray, considered one of the most beautiful and artistic of Angkor, and Ta Keo, the first temple of Angkor built completely of sandstone. A decade of conflict followed the death of Jayavarman V. Three kings reigned simultaneously as antagonists until Suryavarman I gained the throne. Suryavarman I established diplomatic relations with the Chola dynasty of South India. Suryavarman I sent a chariot as a present to the Chola Emperor Rajaraja Chola I. His rule was marked by repeated attempts by his opponents to overthrow him and by military conquests. Suryavarman was successful in taking control of the Khmer capital city of Angkor Wat. At the same time, Angkor Wat came into conflict with the Tamberlinga kingdom of the Malay Peninsula. In other words, there was a three-way conflict in mainland Southeast Asia. After surviving several invasions from his enemies, Suryavarman requested aid from the powerful Chola Emperor Rajendra Chola I of the Chola dynasty against the Tamberlinga kingdom. After learning of Suryavarman's alliance with Rajendra Chola, the Tamberlinga kingdom requested aid from the Srivijaya king Sangrama Vijayachingavarman. This eventually led to the Khmer Empire coming into conflict with the Srivijaya Empire. The war ended with a victory for the Chola dynasty and of the Khmer Empire, and major losses for the Srivijaya Empire and the Tamberlinga kingdom. This alliance also had religious nuance, since both Chola and Khmer Empire were Hindu Shaivite, while Tamberlinga and Srivijaya were Mahayana Buddhist. There is some indication that before or after these incidents Suryavarman I sent a gift, a chariot, to Rajendra Chola I to possibly facilitate trade or an alliance. Suryavarman I's wife was Viralakshmi, and following his death in 1050, he was succeeded by Udayadityavarman II, who built the Bafuan in West Baray. In 1074, conflict arose between Harshavarman III and the Champa king Harivarman IV. Golden Age of Khmer Civilization. Suryavarman II, Angkor Wat. The 12th century was a time of conflict and brutal power struggles. Under Jayavarman II, the kingdom united internally, and the large temple of Angkor was built in a period of 37 years, Angkor Wat, dedicated to the god Vishnu. In the east, his campaigns against Champa and Dai Viet were unsuccessful, though he sacked Vijaya in 1145 and deposed Jayavarman III. The Khmers occupied Vijaya until 1149, when they were driven out by Jayavarman I. Jayavarman II sent a mission to the Chola dynasty of South India and presented a precious stone to the Chola emperor Kulatunga Chola I in 1114. Another period followed in which kings reigned briefly and were violently overthrown by their successors. Finally, in 1177 the capital was raided and looted in a naval battle on the Tonle Sap Lake by a Cham fleet under Jayavarman IV, and Tribhuvanadityavarman was killed. Jayavarman VII, Angkor Thom. King Jayavarman VII was generally considered as Cambodia's greatest king. He had already been a military leader as a prince under the previous kings. After the Cham had conquered Angkor, he gathered an army and regained the capital. He ascended the throne and continued the war against the neighboring Eastern Kingdom for another 22 years, until the Khmer defeated Champa in 1203 and conquered large parts of its territory. According to Chinese sources, Jayavarman VII added Pegu to the territory of the Khmer Empire in 1195. Jayavarman VII stands as the last of the great kings of Angkor, not only because of his successful war against the Cham, but also because he was not a tyrannical ruler in the manner of his immediate predecessors. He unified the empire and carried out noteworthy building projects. The new capital, now called Angkor Thom, was built. In the center, the king had constructed as the state temple the Bayon, with towers bearing faces of the Bodhisattva of Avalokitesvara, each several meters high, carved out of stone. Further important temples built under Jayavarman VII were Ta Prokham for his mother, Pra Khan for his father, Bante Kadai, and Neek Pian, as well as the reservoir of Srisrang. An extensive network of roads was laid down connecting every town of the empire, with rest houses built for travelers and a total of 102 hospitals established across his realm. Jayavarman VIII, the last blooming. After the death of Jayavarman VII, his son Indravarman II ascended the throne. Like his father, he was a Buddhist, and he completed a series of temples begun under his father's rule. As a warrior he was less successful. In the year 1220, under mounting pressure from increasingly powerful Dai Viet and its Cham alliance, the Khmer withdrew from many of the provinces previously conquered from Champa. In the west, his Thai subjects rebelled, establishing the first Thai kingdom at Sukhothai and pushing back the Khmer. In the following 200 years, the Thais would become the chief rivals of Kambuja. Indravarman II was succeeded by Jayavarman VIII. In contrast to his predecessors, Jayavarman VIII was a follower of Hindu Shaivism and an aggressive opponent of Buddhism, destroying many Buddha statues in the empire and converting Buddhist temples to Hindu temples. From the outside, the empire was threatened in 1283 by the Mongols under Kublai Khan's general Sajatu, who was the governor of Guangzhou, China. The king avoided war with his powerful opponent, who ruled all of China, by paying annual tribute, starting in 1285. Jayavarman VIII's rule ended in 1295 when he was deposed by his son-in-law Srindravarman. The new king was a follower of Theravada Buddhism, a school of Buddhism that had arrived in Southeast Asia from Sri Lanka and subsequently spread through most of the region. In August 1296, the Chinese diplomat Zhou Deguan arrived at Angkor and recorded, in the recent war with the Siamese, the country was utterly devastated. He remained at the court of King Srindravarman until July 1297. He was neither the first nor the last Chinese representative to visit Kambuja. His stay is notable, however, because Zhou Deguan later wrote a detailed report on life in Angkor. His portrayal is today one of the most important sources of understanding historical Angkor. Alongside descriptions of several great temples, his account informs us that the towers of the Bayon were once covered in gold. The text also offers valuable information on the everyday life and the habits of the inhabitants of Angkor. Decline. By the 14th century, the Khmer Empire suffered a long, arduous, and steady decline. Historians have proposed different causes for the decline: the religious conversion from Vishnuyot Shivate Hinduism to Theravada Buddhism that affected social and political systems, incessant internal power struggles among Khmer princes, vassal revolt, foreign invasion, plague, and ecological breakdown. For social and religious reasons, many aspects contributed to the decline of the Khmer Empire. The relationship between the rulers and their elites was unstable. Among the 27 Angkorian rulers, 11 lacked a legitimate claim to power, and civil wars were frequent. The Khmer Empire focused more on the domestic economy and did not take advantage of the international maritime network. In addition, the input of Buddhist ideas conflicted and disturbed the state order built under the predominant Hinduism. Conversion of faith. The last Sanskrit inscription is dated 1327 and describes the succession of Indra Jayavarman by Jayavarman VII. Historians suspect a connection with the king's adoption of Theravada Buddhism. They were therefore no longer considered Devarajas, and there was no need to erect huge temples to them, or rather to the gods under whose protection they stood. The retreat from the concept of the Devaraja may also have led to a loss of royal authority and thereby to a lack of workers. The water management apparatus also degenerated, meaning that harvests were reduced by floods or drought. While previously 3 rice harvests per year were possible, a substantial contribution to the prosperity and power of Kambuja, the declining harvests further weakened the empire. Looking at the archaeological record, however, archaeologists noticed that not only were the structures ceasing to be built, but the Khmer's historical inscription was also lacking from the period of 1300 to 1600. With this lack of historical content, there is unfortunately very limited archaeological evidence to work with. Archaeologists have been able to determine that the sites were abandoned and then reoccupied later by different people. Foreign pressure. The western neighbor of the Khmer, the first Thai kingdom of Sukhothai, after repelling Angkorian hegemony, was conquered by another stronger Thai kingdom in the lower Chao Phraya Basin, Ayutthaya, in 1350. From the 14th century on, Ayutthaya became Angkor's rival. Angkor was besieged by the El-Hayyan king Uthong in 1352, and following its capture the next year, the Khmer monarch was replaced with successive Siamese princes. Then in 1357, the Khmer king Suryavamsa Rajataraja regained the throne. In 1393, the El-Hayyan king Ramasuan besieged Angkor again, capturing it the next year. Ramasuan's son ruled Khmer a short time before being assassinated. Finally, in 1431, the Khmer king Paniyayat abandoned Angkor as indefensible, and moved to the Phnom Penh area. The new center of the Khmer kingdom was in the southwest, at Aodong in the region of today's Phnom Penh. However, there are indications that Angkor was not completely abandoned. One line of Khmer kings may have remained there, while a second moved to Phnom Penh to establish a parallel kingdom. The final fall of Angkor would then be due to the transfer of economic, and therewith political, significance, as Phnom Penh became an important trade center on the Mekong. Besides, severe droughts and ensuing floods were considered as one of the contributing factors to its fall. The empire focused more on regional trade after the first drought. Ecological breakdown. Ecological failure and infrastructural breakdown is a new alternative theory regarding the end of the Khmer Empire. Scientists working on the Greater Angkor project believe that the Khmers had an elaborate system of reservoirs and canals used for trade, transportation, and irrigation. The canals were used for harvesting rice. As the population grew, there was more strain on the water system. During the 14th and 15th centuries, there were also severe climatic changes impacting the water management system. Periods of drought led to decreases in agricultural productivity, and violent floods due to monsoons damaged the infrastructure during this vulnerable time. To adapt to the growing population, trees were cut down from the Kulin Hills and cleared out for more rice fields. That created rain runoff carrying sediment to the canal network. Any damage to the water system would have enormous consequences. Plague. The plague theory, which suggests a severe epidemic outbreak might have hit the heavily populated Angkor and contributed to the fall of the empire, has been reconsidered. By the 14th century, the Black Death had affected Asia, as the plague first appeared in China around 1330 and reached Europe around 1345. Most seaports along the line of travel from China to Europe felt the impact of the disease, which might have had a severe impact on life throughout Southeast Asia. Possible diseases include bubonic plague, smallpox and malaria. Angkor after the 15th century. In any event, there is evidence for a further period of use of Angkor. Under the rule of King Bahram Ryakya I, who temporarily succeeded in driving back the Thai, the royal court was briefly returned to Angkor. But, Angkor became a part of Taungoo dynasty by King Bayantong in 1580 and regained independence in 1599 from Burma. Inscriptions from the 17th century testify to Japanese settlements alongside those of the remaining Khmer. The best-known inscription tells of Yukundeyu Kazufusa, who celebrated the Khmer New Year there in 1632. However, in following decades the Japanese community was absorbed into the local Khmer community, owing to the lack of new Japanese arrivals and very little possibility of renewing their community.